The dinner table was set, but I could already feel the weight of my parents' expectations pressing down on me. As I shared the news of my recent promotion, my mother's eyes darted to my brother, the golden child, who had just arrived late as usual. "Isn't it nice to have your brother's support, Lisa?" she chirped, her tone laced with thinly veiled condescension. I could sense the familiar undercurrent of favoritism as my brother smirked, reveling in the attention. With the family dinner looming in just a few hours, I knew this would only escalate, and I braced myself for the inevitable onslaught of comparisons and criticisms. Growing up, I always felt like the backup plan. No matter what I did, my brother was the star of the show. He was the one who got praised for everything while I was often told I needed to try harder. I could practically hear the unspoken rule. My brother's success was the only success that mattered. I'd spent years trying to prove myself, but each time I achieved something, it was quickly overshadowed by his latest triumph. As we sat down for dinner, I could already feel the tension in the air. The table was filled with all my brother's favorite dishes, while my own accomplishments felt like an afterthought. I could see my parents' proud smiles as they listened to him talk about his latest business venture, while I sat there trying to provide an encouraging nod, even though it felt like I was disappearing into the background. The evening wore on, and with each story my brother shared, I felt smaller. My father's dismissive comments about my promotion stung, but I forced a smile. I had learned that keeping the peace often meant sacrificing my own feelings. But deep down, I knew this cycle couldn't continue. I was tired of being the invisible sister, the one who was always compared and never quite enough. I knew I had to prepare myself for the inevitable comparisons, for the familiar feeling of being belittled, and I steeled myself against it. I wouldn't let their expectations define me any longer. Tonight was going to be different, but I didn't know how yet. As the evening progressed, I felt like a mere shadow, overshadowed by my brother's accomplishments. The dinner table was set with an extra seat for him, the golden child who always got the spotlight. My mother's voice rang out, full of pride as she turned the conversation toward him. "Lisa, why can't you be more like your brother? He's always got something impressive to share." My heart sank as I felt the familiar sting of comparison. It was a ritual I knew all too well, a dance I had been forced to partake in since childhood. I recalled the countless times they had belittled my efforts, reminding me of my supposed failures. The unspoken rule was clear. My brother's success was the only success worth celebrating. Each time they compared us, I felt the sting of their words, and the emotional toll was accumulating. My father chimed in, dismissing my promotion with a wave of his hand. "That's nice, but your brother is really making waves in the business world. Isn't that right, son?" I could see my brother smirking, relishing the attention. He had this effortless charm, a way of making everything seem easy. It was as if he thrived on their validation, while I was left to pick up the pieces of my self-esteem. I took a deep breath, trying to suppress the anger bubbling inside me. With every jab, I realized I was being pushed further into the background, merely a facilitator for my brother's status in the family. I had spent years trying to prove that I deserved a place at the table, but every time I did, they found a way to remind me that I was still second best. I could feel the weight of their expectations pressing down on me like a heavy blanket, suffocating and oppressive. I wanted to scream, to tell them that I was proud of my accomplishments, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I forced a smile, nodding along as my brother regaled them with tales of his latest deals, feeling like a ghost in my own life. The food laid before us felt like a cruel joke. They'd made all his favorite dishes, while my own accomplishments felt like an afterthought. I could see my parents' proud smiles as they listened to him talk about his latest business venture, while I sat there trying to provide an encouraging nod, even though it felt like I was disappearing into the background. I thought about how many times I had put myself on the line for my family, only to be met with indifference or scorn. The way they dismissed my achievements hurt more than I could express, and I felt the familiar knot of frustration tightening in my chest. I wanted to scream, to tell them that I was done being compared, that I was done being the invisible sister. But that wasn't how our family operated. I knew that by standing up for myself, I risked alienating them further. The thought terrified me. What if I lost them altogether? I felt a deep sense of resentment brewing inside me, a mix of anger and sadness. I had always been the one to keep the peace, to smooth over the rough edges of our family dynamics. But as I sat there, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was slowly losing myself in the process. I didn't want to feel like this anymore. I wanted to be acknowledged for who I was, not just as a footnote in my brother's story. As my brother continued to bask in the glow of their admiration, I realized that I had a choice to make. I could either continue to play the part of the dutiful daughter or finally stand up and demand to be seen. I knew deep down that I was worthy of love and recognition, just as much as he was. It was time to reclaim my voice, to assert my place in this family, and to stop letting their favor dictate my self-worth. As I sat there, I prepared myself for the inevitable comparisons, for the familiar feeling of being belittled, and I steeled myself against it. I wouldn't let their expectations define me any longer. Tonight was going to be different, but I didn't know how yet. I could feel the tension in the air, and I knew something had to give. The cycle of favoritism had to be broken, and I was the one who had to do it. While clearing the dishes, I overheard my brother on a phone call, boasting about how he had manipulated a business deal, claiming I was too naive to understand the game. My heart raced as I realized the depth of his deceit. He wasn't just riding on a wave of success. He was fabricating a reality built on lies, and I had been complicit in maintaining the illusion for the sake of our family's reputation. The humiliation washed over me, and I felt the final thread of my patience snap. No more. I wouldn't allow myself to be the scapegoat any longer. At that moment, I could feel a mix of anger and disbelief flooding my veins. How could he lie so effortlessly, twisting the truth to make himself look good? I had always been honest and hardworking, yet here he was, taking shortcuts and getting rewarded for it. I thought of all the times my parents had praised him, the times they had compared our achievements, and how they had brushed mine aside. I felt the injustice burning inside me, and with every word I heard him say, I was filled with a growing sense of determination. I paused, standing in the kitchen, feeling the weight of the moment. The dishes I was supposed to be washing seemed to fade away as I focused on the betrayal I was witnessing. I had spent years trying to prove my worth to a family that only saw value in one child, and now I was watching as my brother reveled in his deceit. I couldn't let this continue. I wouldn't be the one left in the shadows any longer. As I put down the dish I was holding, I felt a surge of strength rising within me. I had been the quiet one for too long, the one who accepted their judgment without question. But now I was ready to confront the reality of our family dynamics. I had been pushed aside, treated as an afterthought while my brother basked in the glory of his fabricated success. It was infuriating, and it was time to put an end to it. Deciding to confront him, I took a deep breath and stepped into the living room. There he was, still on the phone, laughing and bragging about how easy it was to pull one over on our parents. I felt my blood boil. "You think it's all a game, don't you?" I burst out, startling him. He looked at me, eyes wide with surprise, clearly unprepared for my sudden appearance. "What are you talking about?" he said, feigning innocence, though I could see the smirk beginning to fade from his face. "I just heard you on the phone lying about that deal. You're not as smart as you think you are, and you're certainly not fooling me anymore. I can't believe you would stoop so low just to get a pat on the back from our parents. Do you really think they'll be proud of you when they find out the truth?" His expression shifted from surprise to anger, and I could see the wheels turning in his mind as he tried to regain control of the situation. "You're just jealous because you've never been able to achieve anything on your own," he shot back, his voice rising. I felt a rush of adrenaline as I realized he was trying to deflect the blame back onto me. It was classic him, always spinning things so that I was the problem. But I was done being the target for his insecurities. "This isn't about me," I shouted back, my voice steady and unwavering. "This is about you and your pathetic attempts to make yourself look good at my expense. Your lies are not going to hold up forever, and when they come crumbling down, don't expect me to pick up the pieces for you." For a moment we stood there, locked in a battle of wills. I could see the rage boiling in his eyes as he struggled to maintain his composure. There was something liberating about standing up to him, about breaking the cycle of silence and acceptance that had defined our relationship for so long. As the air crackled with tension, I knew I had crossed a line. There wouldn't be any going back after this confrontation, but I didn't care. I was tired of being the good daughter, the one who went along with everything just to keep the peace. It was time to reclaim my voice and my power. No more hiding in the shadows, no more accepting the role of the family scapegoat. I was ready to stand up for myself no matter the cost. I wouldn't allow myself to be humiliated any longer. The humiliation I felt earlier transformed into a fierce determination. I wouldn't let my brother's lies define me or our family dynamic any longer. I was ready to break free from the chains of favoritism and manipulation that had bound me for too long. I was ready to fight for my place in this family, to demand the respect I had always deserved. As I walked away from that confrontation, I felt lighter. I was done being the passive participant in my family's drama. I was ready to take control of my narrative, and there was no turning back. I placed the last dish down and turned to my family, my voice steady but firm. I'm done being the family's doormat. If you can't recognize my achievements without dragging me through the mud, then I won't be coming to these dinners anymore. The room fell silent, my mother's eyes widening in disbelief, while my brother scoffed. They didn't take me seriously, but this time I was prepared. I had set my limits and I was ready to enforce them, even if it meant facing their wrath. The moment hung in the air, thick with tension. I could feel my heart racing, but I stood my ground, refusing to back down. I had been quiet for too long, letting their words wash over me like water off a duck's back. But now I was done. I had spent years feeling small, feeling like I didn't matter, and I was no longer willing to accept that role. My mother's expression shifted from disbelief to indignation. Lisa, how could you say that? We are family. We have to support each other. Your brother needs us and you need to be there for him, she said, her voice rising. The familiar guilt trip was in full swing, and I could feel her trying to reel me back in with emotional manipulation. You don't understand, do you? This isn't about support. It's about respect. You've always put him above me, and I'm tired of it. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks, but I pushed on. You never celebrate my wins. You only use them as a backdrop to praise him. I deserve better than that. I deserve to be seen for who I am, not just as the comparison to your golden child. My brother, who had been sitting back with a smug look on his face, suddenly interjected. Oh, come on, Lisa. You're just being dramatic. You think you've achieved something great, but it's nothing compared to what I've done. You're just jealous because you're not in the limelight. Get over yourself. His tone was condescending, and it only fueled my fire. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. Jealous? No, I'm not jealous. I'm angry. I'm angry that you can't see me for who I am. I'm angry that you think lying and manipulating is a way to win admiration. I'm angry that you get to bask in the glory, while I'm treated like an afterthought. This isn't about competition. It's about my worth as an individual. And right now I feel worthless in your eyes. Their expression shifted from disbelief to anger as I laid everything out. My mother's face flushed with rage, and I could see her struggling to find the right words to retaliate. You're being so selfish, Lisa. This isn't about you. Your brother has worked hard to achieve his goals, and you should be proud of him instead of trying to tear him down. I felt a sense of clarity wash over me. Her words didn't hold the power they once did. I wasn't tearing him down. I was finally standing up for myself. No, Mom. This is about me finally standing up for my own achievements. I've worked hard too, and it's time I get recognized for it. If you can't see that, then I don't need to be a part of this family dynamic anymore. I won't continue to put myself through this emotional roller coaster just to keep the peace. I'm taking a step back, and I won't be coming to these dinners. I refuse to be belittled any longer. Their faces morphed into expressions of shock and anger. My mother's mouth hung open, and my brother's eyes narrowed. They were not used to me speaking up like this, and I could see the gears turning as they tried to formulate their next move. Would they try to guilt me into submission? Would they play the victim? Whatever it was, I was ready. You're being unreasonable, Lisa. You're just going to walk away from family? My brother yelled, his voice dripping with disdain. It was as if I had crossed an invisible line, and he was desperate to pull me back into the fold. Yes, I am. I shot back, my voice unwavering. If that's what it takes to maintain my dignity, then yes, I will walk away. I'm not here to play the role of the supportive sister while you take all the credit. I'm not going to sit in silence while you bask in your lies. I'm done. The tension in the room was suffocating, and I could feel every eye on me, waiting for me to back down. But I refused to give them that power. I had made my choice and I was ready to follow through. No more would I be the quiet one in the corner. No more would I be the family scapegoat. I was reclaiming my voice, my worth, and my identity. As I stood there, I felt a sense of liberation wash over me. I had finally broken free from the chains that had held me down for so long. No matter their response, I had chosen myself, and I would continue to choose myself moving forward. As the evening wore on, my mother leaned in, her voice low. You wouldn't want to hurt your brother's feelings, would you? He needs your support. The guilt dripped from her words, and I could feel the familiar tug of obligation. Just this once, Lisa. Don't be selfish, my brother chimed in, his tone dripping with feigned concern. They were manipulating me, using blood ties to enforce their demands. I felt the pressure mount, but I held my ground, reminding myself of the cost of compliance. I could see the disappointment etched on my mother's face, and my brother's smug expression only fueled my anger. It was the same old routine. Guilt trip followed by emotional blackmail. They wanted me to feel like I was the villain for wanting to prioritize my own feelings over theirs. I could almost hear my mother's internal monologue. You should be grateful for what we've given you. How can you be so ungrateful? It was exhausting and I was sick of it. Mom, this isn't about hurting anyone's feelings. This is about me standing up for myself for once. I replied, my voice steady but filled with a rising intensity. I can't keep pretending everything is fine when it's not. I've spent my entire life supporting you both while being pushed aside. I'm done with that. I deserve more than being your backup plan or the consolation prize. Their expressions shifted as my words sank in. I could see my mother's facade cracking, and my brother's eyes darkening with irritation. They were not used to me pushing back, and it rattled them. I could feel the tension in the room thickening, and I was acutely aware of the stakes. Would they continue to play the victim? Would they try to guilt me into submission? Whatever it was, I was ready. You can't just turn your back on family. My brother blurted out, his voice rising in anger. What kind of sister are you? You're supposed to be there for me. It was always the same tactic, turning the blame back on me, trying to paint me as the villain in this family drama. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding in my chest. I'm not turning my back on family. I'm turning my back on toxic behavior. You think I owe you support just because we share the same blood? I refuse to be a pawn in your game any longer. You can't manipulate me with guilt, and I won't let you. The room was silent as I glared at him, refusing to back down. My mother jumped in, her voice laced with desperation. You're being unreasonable, Lisa. Your brother has worked hard, and you should be proud of him instead of tearing him down. I could see the fear in her eyes, the fear of losing control over me. It was a tactic I had seen too many times before, but I was done falling for it. Proud of him? Proud of what? A web of lies? I shot back, my voice unwavering. I'm tired of playing this role where I have to celebrate his deceit, while my achievements are overlooked. If you can't recognize my worth, then I don't need to be around to validate his. I'm taking a step back from all of this, and if that means not coming to these dinners anymore, so be it. The silence that followed felt deafening. I could see the shock on my mother's face, and my brother's smug expression had completely faded. He looked bewildered, as if he couldn't comprehend the fact that I was finally standing up for myself. You're being selfish, he yelled, the desperation in his voice growing. You think you can just walk away? You're ruining this family. I felt a sense of calm wash over me as he lashed out. No, you're ruining this family with your lies and manipulation. I'm not the problem here, you are. I'm tired of being the one who has to clean up the mess you leave behind. I'm done being the scapegoat for your failures. As the words left my mouth, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I was finally breaking free from the chains that had bound me for so long. No more would I be the quiet one, the one who accepted their judgment without question. I was reclaiming my voice, my worth, and my identity. My mother's face morphed into one of indignation. You think this is easy for us? You think we enjoy this? Your brother needs our support. Support for what? For lying and manipulating? I'm not going to be a part of that anymore. I could feel my resolve hardening. If you choose to walk away, don't expect us to chase after you. My brother spat, his voice dripping with venom. I don't care. I shouted back, my heart racing. I'm done caring about what you think. If that's what it takes to maintain my dignity, then yes, I will walk away. I refuse to be belittled any longer. The tension in the room was suffocating, and I could feel every eye on me, waiting for me to back down. But I refused to give them that power. I had made my choice and I was ready to follow through. No more would I be the passive participant in my family's drama. As I stood there, I felt a sense of liberation wash over me. I had finally broken free from the chains that had held me down for too long. No matter their response, I had chosen myself, and I would continue to choose myself moving forward. During dessert, my brother made an offhand comment about his latest business venture that made everyone laugh. I could see the anticipation in their eyes, waiting for me to join in the applause. Instead, I remained silent. When he turned to me with that expectant gaze, I stood my ground, refusing to feed into the charade. The tension in the room was palpable. It felt like everyone was holding their breath, waiting for me to crumble under the pressure. But I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. As he continued to regale the table with tales of his success, I felt a sense of detachment wash over me. The laughter felt hollow, and the way my parents hung on his every word made me feel sick. I glanced around the table, noticing how their faces lit up with pride as he spun his web of lies. In that moment, I realized I was done playing the role of the supportive sister who quietly accepted the bullshit, while everyone else celebrated his deceit. "Isn't that right, Lisa?" he asked, looking directly at me, expecting me to jump in and validate his story. I took a deep breath, holding my ground. "I don't think it's right to manipulate people for personal gain," I finally said, my voice steady. The laughter died down, and a heavy silence fell over the table. My mother's eyes widened in shock, and my brother's expression morphed into anger. "What do you mean?" he shot back, his voice rising. "You're just jealous because you've never been able to achieve anything on your own." It was the same old tactic, deflection and personal attacks. I could see the wheels turning in his mind as he tried to regain control of the situation. "This isn't about me," I shouted back, my voice unwavering. "This is about you and your pathetic attempts to make yourself look good at my expense. Your lies are not going to hold up forever, and when they come crumbling down, don't expect me to pick up the pieces for you." My words hung in the air between us, and I could feel the tension crackling like static electricity. He looked stunned for a moment, and I could see the rage boiling in his eyes as he struggled to maintain his composure. "You think you're so much better than everyone else, don't you?" he sneered, leaning back in his chair. "You never have anything nice to say about me, do you?" It was classic him, always spinning things so that I was the problem. But I was done being the target for his insecurities. I took another deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. "No, I'm not better than anyone else. I'm just tired of being the one who supports your lies while you take all the credit. I'm tired of being the one who's always in the background, waiting for my moment that never comes. I deserve my own recognition, and I refuse to let you take that away from me anymore." For a moment we stood there, locked in a battle of wills. I could see the shock on my mother's face, and I knew I had crossed a line. But I didn't care. I was tired of being the good daughter, the one who went along with everything just to keep the peace. It was time to reclaim my voice and my power. "You're ruining this family with your attitude," my brother yelled, his face flushed with anger. "No, you're ruining it," I shot back, my voice steady. "You're the one who's been lying and manipulating everyone for your gain. I'm just tired of being a part of your game. You don't get to use me as a pawn anymore." The air was thick with tension, and I could feel the weight of their expectations pressing down on me. But I stood my ground, refusing to back down. I had been quiet for too long, letting their words wash over me like water off a duck's back. But now I was done. I had spent years feeling small, feeling like I didn't matter, and I was no longer willing to accept that role. The silence in the room was deafening. I could see my mother's face morphing from disbelief to anger. "You're being so selfish, Lisa. This isn't about you," she exclaimed, her voice rising in indignation. I felt a sense of clarity wash over me. Her words didn't hold the power they once did. I wasn't tearing him down. I was finally standing up for myself. "No, Mom. This is about me finally standing up for my own achievements. I've worked hard too, and it's time I get recognized for it. If you can't see that, then I don't need to be a part of this family dynamic anymore. I won't continue to put myself through this emotional roller coaster just to keep the peace. I'm taking a step back, and I won't be coming to these dinners anymore. I refuse to be belittled any longer." Their faces morphed into expressions of shock and anger. My mother's mouth hung open, and my brother's eyes narrowed. They were not used to me speaking up like this, and I could see the gears turning as they tried to formulate their next move. Would they try to guilt me into submission? Would they play the victim? Whatever it was, I was ready. In a moment of clarity, I chose to walk away from the table, leaving the remnants of dessert untouched. My brother called after me, but I didn't turn back. I was done being the glue holding this family's facade together. As I stepped out of the room, I felt a sense of liberation. No more catering to their expectations. I wouldn't be the one to clean up the mess they'd created. It was time for them to face the reality they had ignored for too long. I walked down the hallway, my heart pounding, but this time it was not out of fear. It was exhilaration. I could hear my brother's voice behind me, laced with frustration. "You can't just walk away," he shouted, his tone rising as I moved further away. I didn't respond, I just kept walking. I had spent too long being caught in the cycle of their drama, waiting for validation that would never come. As I reached the front door, I paused for a moment, taking a deep breath. The weight of years of emotional turmoil felt lighter, like a burden I had finally cast off. I turned around to face the dining room once more. My family still gathered around the table, their expressions a mix of shock and anger. I saw my mother's face twisted in disbelief, and my brother's eyes were blazing with indignation. They were not used to this version of me, strong, resolute, and unyielding. "You think you can just leave?" my brother called out, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Good luck out there on your own. You'll see how easy it is to cut off your family and pretend you're better off." I shot back, my voice filled with conviction. "I'm not pretending anything. I'm choosing to prioritize my well-being over your toxic behaviors. I'm done enabling your lies and manipulation. If you think that means I'm worse off, then so be it. I refuse to be a pawn in your game any longer." As I stepped outside, the cool night air hit my face like a refreshing wave. I walked down the driveway, feeling like I was finally taking control of my life. I heard the door slam behind me, and my mother's voice rang out, filled with anger. "You'll regret this, Lisa. You're throwing away a family for your pride." But her words didn't have the same sting they once did. I felt a sense of peace settle over me as I walked further away from their chaos. I was done being the one who put everyone else's feelings first, who sacrificed my own happiness for the sake of keeping the peace. I was ready to explore a life free of their toxic influence. The drive home was quiet, and I found myself reflecting on everything that had just happened. I was shaking, but it was a good kind of shaking, an awakening. I had finally stood up for myself in a way I never thought I could. I was no longer that little girl who cowered under their expectations. I was a woman who recognized her worth and was willing to fight for it. When I got home, I sat down on my couch, still buzzing with adrenaline. This was the first time in years that I felt truly free. I didn't need their approval, their validation, or their love. I had spent so long trying to earn a place in their hearts, only to realize that I was wasting my energy on people who would never truly see me. I decided then and there that I would create a new life for myself, one where I could thrive without the constant comparisons and criticisms. I got up, walked over to my desk, and started jotting down my goals. I wanted to focus on my career, travel, and invest in myself without the weight of my family's expectations dragging me down. The next few weeks were transformative. I immersed myself in work, took on projects that excited me, and even started planning a solo trip I had always dreamed of. Each day felt like a small victory, and I reveled in the quiet that filled my life without my family's constant presence. The silence was a welcome change from the chaos I had grown accustomed to. I stopped answering their calls and texts. I didn't feel guilty anymore. I realized that I had the power to choose who I wanted in my life and who I didn't. It felt liberating to create that distance. I wasn't abandoning them. I was reclaiming my own identity. I focused on building connections with friends who uplifted me and appreciated me for who I was, not who they wanted me to be. My circle began to change, and I felt more supported and understood. I started to embrace the idea that I could have a family of my own choosing, one that didn't come with the toxicity of my upbringing. The more time I spent away from my family, the clearer my vision became. I was no longer defined by their narrative. I was Lisa, a successful woman with dreams and aspirations that mattered. The distance I had created allowed me to heal and grow without the constant weight of their judgments. In that newfound solitude I found my strength. I began to thrive in my career, gaining promotions and recognition for my hard work. I knew that I was capable of achieving anything I set my mind to, and I refused to let anyone, especially my family, diminish that belief ever again. As I sat in my living room, I realized that I had finally chosen myself. I was no longer waiting for them to validate my existence. I had built a life I was proud of, one that was free from their toxic grasp. And in that moment I felt a deep sense of peace wash over me, knowing that I was finally living life on my own terms. The dinner ended in chaos as my family began to lash out. "You ruined everything," my mother yelled, her face flushed with anger. My brother joined in, accusing me of being ungrateful. I did not respond. Their words were empty to me now. I could see the shock on the faces of the guests, and it brought me a sense of satisfaction. They were losing control, and for the first time I felt validated. My family was revealing their true colors, and it was all happening in front of witnesses. I stood there taking in the scene. My mother's face was a mask of rage, her hands trembling as she pointed at me, as if I was the cause of all their problems. "You think you're so much better than us now?" she spat, her voice thick with indignation. "All because you got a little promotion? You think that makes you special?" I could feel the weight of her words, but instead of crumbling, I felt a surge of strength. It was as if every insult they had ever thrown at me was boiling to the surface, and I was finally ready to confront it all. I glanced around the table, noticing the expressions on the faces of the guests, some astonished, others uncomfortable. This was a family dinner, and it was turning into a spectacle. "You've always been jealous of your brother," my mother continued, her voice rising above the murmurs of the guests. "He's trying to help you, and you just want to tear him down." It was the same old narrative, and I was done playing the part of the villain in their story. "No, I'm not jealous. I'm tired of being belittled." I finally shot back, my voice steady and clear. "I'm tired of being the one who stands in your shadow, while you celebrate his deceit. This isn't about jealousy. It's about recognizing my worth." My brother's face twisted in anger. "You think you're so high and mighty now? You're nothing without us," he yelled, his voice laced with venom. I could see the panic in his eyes. He was losing control of the narrative, and he didn't know how to handle it. The guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats, clearly caught in the crossfire of a family feud. "I'm nothing without you?" I laughed, a sound tinged with disbelief. "You've made sure of that for years. Every time I achieved something you made sure to overshadow it. Every time I tried to share my success, you turned it into a competition. I'm putting an end to that tonight." The tension in the room thickened, and I could feel the collective breath of the guests as they awaited my brother's response. He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Instead, he narrowed his eyes at me, seething with rage. "You'll regret this. You're throwing away your family for the sake of your pride." Pride? No, this is about self-respect. I shot back, my heart racing with adrenaline. "I'm done being the scapegoat for your failures, and I refuse to be the target of your manipulation any longer. You want to play games? Fine, but I won't be a pawn in them anymore." I could see the disbelief in my mother's eyes, the shock that her daughter was finally standing up for herself. This wasn't how family dinners were supposed to go, and I could sense her fear of losing control. I turned to the guests, who looked on in shock, and felt a rush of empowerment wash over me. I was no longer the quiet one, the one who accepted their judgment without question. I was reclaiming my voice. "You think this is easy for us?" my mother exclaimed, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "You think we enjoy this? Your brother needs your support." "Support for what? For lying and manipulating?" I countered, my voice rising. "I'm not going to be a part of that anymore. If you can't accept my achievements without dragging me through the mud, then I won't be coming to these dinners anymore." I refused to be belittled any longer. Their faces morphed into expressions of disbelief and anger. My mother's mouth hung open, and my brother's eyes narrowed, his anger palpable. They were not used to me speaking up like this, and I could see the gears turning as they tried to formulate their next move. Would they try to guilt me into submission? Would they play the victim? Whatever it was, I was ready. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, but it was a good kind of pounding, an awakening. I had finally stood up for myself in a way I never thought I could. I was no longer that little girl who cowered under their expectations. I was a woman who recognized her worth and was willing to fight for it. The silence wrapped around us like a thick fog, and I took a deep breath, steadying myself for whatever would come next. If you choose to walk away, don't expect us to chase after you. My brother spat, his voice dripping with disdain. I don't care. I shouted back, my heart racing. I'm done caring about what you think. If that's what it takes to maintain my dignity, then yes, I will walk away. I refused to be belittled any longer. The tension in the room was suffocating, and I could feel every eye on me, waiting for me to back down. But I refused to give them that power. I had made my choice and I was ready to follow through. No more would I be the passive participant in my family's drama. I was taking control of my life and I was done being their scapegoat. As the dust settled, it became evident that my brother's bubble had burst. The guests murmured about his shady dealings, and I could see him sweating under the scrutiny. You can't just walk away, he shouted, panic rising in his voice as he realized he had lost his safety net. I remained silent, but my heart swelled with a sense of freedom. I had no responsibility to protect him anymore, and it was clear to everyone that he was utterly incompetent without my help. I hadn't lost anything. I had gained liberation. The atmosphere in the room shifted dramatically. My family, once the powerful puppeteers of my life, were now the ones caught in a web of their own making. I could see their expressions change from anger to fear as the realization hit them. My silence was no longer a sign of weakness, but a testament to my strength. I was no longer the person they could manipulate with guilt or shame. I had taken a stand, and it was shaking the very foundation of their control. The guests, who had initially come for a pleasant family dinner, were now witnesses to the unraveling of a toxic family dynamic. I could feel their eyes darting between my brother and me, taking in the tension, the anger, and the palpable shift in power. I had finally called out the elephant in the room, and it was a sight to behold. Lisa, you can't just leave. You'll regret this. My mother shouted, her voice tinged with desperation. But her words fell flat. I was done with regret. I was done with feeling guilty for standing up for myself. I had spent too long trying to earn their approval, only to realize that nothing I did would ever be enough for them. Regret? No, Mom. I've been regretting my silence for years, I shot back, my voice steady. I'm done living in your shadow, and I refuse to be your scapegoat anymore. I could see the disbelief on my mother's face, the realization that her hold over me was slipping away. My brother, on the other hand, was seething. He was losing control of the narrative, and his anger was palpable. You think you're so much better than us now? He spat, his tone laced with bitterness. You're just throwing everything away for the sake of a little pride. Pride? No, this is about self-respect. I replied, my conviction rising. I've spent years trying to fit into your mold, trying to make you proud, and all I've done is lose myself in the process. I won't do it anymore. I watched as my brother's face twisted in rage, and for the first time, I felt a sense of satisfaction. I was no longer the quiet one, the one who accepted their judgment without question. I was reclaiming my voice. I looked around the room, taking in the shocked expressions of the guests. I could see some of them shifting uncomfortably in their seats, unsure of how to respond to the unfolding drama. You think you can just walk away from your family? My mother continued, her voice rising in indignation. You'll be sorry when you realize what you've lost. But I wasn't afraid of losing them anymore. I had already lost so much of myself trying to earn their love and approval. I had nothing left to lose. I'm not losing anything. I'm finally choosing to prioritize my own happiness, I declared, feeling a wave of empowerment wash over me. If that means cutting ties, then so be it. The tension in the room thickened, and I could feel my heart racing. This was the moment I had been waiting for. The moment I could finally break free from the chains that had held me down for so long. I was ready to face the consequences, ready to embrace the unknown that lay ahead of me. Don't think you can just walk away and leave us to pick up the pieces, my brother shouted, his voice dripping with venom. You're nothing without us. No, I'm everything without you. I shouted back, my heart pounding in my chest. You've made sure of that for years. I won't be your punching bag anymore. I am taking control of my life. The room fell silent, and I could feel the weight of their disbelief hanging in the air. I had finally stood up for myself in a way I never thought I could. I was no longer that little girl who cowered under their expectations. I was a woman who recognized her worth and was willing to fight for it. As I stood there, I felt a rush of adrenaline coursing through my veins. I was no longer afraid of their anger or their judgment. I was ready to embrace my newfound freedom, ready to step into a life where I didn't have to cater to their expectations or endure their toxic behavior. "I'm done being the one who keeps this family together," I said, my voice steady. "If you want to continue living in this twisted reality, that's your choice. But I refuse to be a part of it any longer." With that, I turned away from the table, leaving behind the remnants of a family dinner that had devolved into chaos. I was finally ready to walk away from the toxicity that had consumed my life for far too long. As I stepped outside, the cool night air hit my face like a refreshing wave, and I felt a sense of liberation wash over me. I had made my choice, and I was ready to embrace the journey ahead. No more catering to their expectations. No more cleaning up their mess. I was finally taking control of my life, and it felt exhilarating. I was done being their scapegoat, and I was ready to forge my own path. In the weeks that followed, I embraced my newfound independence. I began to fill my life with people who genuinely supported me, friends who celebrated my victories and understood my struggles. Each day away from my family felt like peeling back layers of a long-held burden. I realized that the distance I created was not just physical. It was emotional too. I was no longer defined by their toxic narratives or weighed down by their expectations. I focused on my career, pouring my energy into projects that inspired me. I received recognition for my hard work, and with each promotion, I felt a little stronger. I was thriving, and it was liberating. I no longer needed validation from my family. Their opinions no longer mattered, and I was finally free to chase my dreams without the constant fear of judgment. I moved into a new apartment, one that was mine alone. I decorated it with pieces that reflected my personality and interests, creating a space that felt like home. I took pride in my achievements, both big and small, celebrating them with friends who truly appreciated me for who I was. I started traveling, exploring places I had always wanted to see, experiencing life on my own terms. As I sat on my balcony one evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace. I had chosen my path, and it was filled with opportunities and joy. I was no longer waiting for my family to approve of my existence. I was living fully and authentically. The silence that once felt lonely now surrounded me like a warm embrace, and I realized that this was my victory. I had reclaimed my life, and it was beautiful.